In this video, we will talk about trig relationships. First one is a trig identity where sine squared of an angle plus cosine squared of an angle is equal to 1. The other one is tangent of an angle is equal to sine of an angle over cosine of an angle. We will use both of these equations later on in the problem. First, let's simplify. You have 3 cosine of x plus 4 cosine of x. 3 of something plus 4 of something should be equal to 7 of something. So it's 7 cosine of theta. Next, you have tangent of alpha minus 3 tangent of alpha. The answer should be negative 2 tangent of alpha. Simplify. We're given in the previous slide sine squared plus cosine squared is equal to 1. So if we solve for cosine squared, we have 1 minus sine squared. So first, A, 2 minus 2 sine squared theta. First, factor out what's in common between these two binomials, 2. Then you're left with 1 minus sine squared theta. But 1 minus sine squared of theta is equal to cosine squared theta. So the answer will be 2 cosine squared theta. B, you have cosine squared theta times sine of theta plus sine cube of theta. You have sine of theta in common, so factor sine of theta, then you're left with cosine squared theta plus sine squared of theta, but cosine squared plus sine squared is equal to 1, so it's sine of theta. Expand and simplify. We have cosine of theta minus sine of theta quantity squared. You can think of this question as x minus y being squared. After foiling, you get x squared minus 2xy plus y squared. Therefore, your answer will be first term squared, so cosine squared theta minus 2 cosine theta sine of theta plus sine squared theta. Again, cosine squared plus sine squared is equal to 1, so you have 1 minus 2 cosine theta sine of theta. Factorize. A, cosine squared alpha minus sine squared alpha. You can think of this again as an x squared minus y squared. How does this factor? It's a difference of squares, x minus y and x plus y. So the middle terms will cancel out and you're left with x squared minus y squared. The same logic will happen in here, so you're going to factor out as a cosine of alpha minus sine of alpha, and then cosine of alpha plus sine of alpha. Last, we have tangent squared theta minus 3 tangent of theta plus 2. You can again think of it as x squared minus 3x plus 2. How do they factor? They factor out as x minus 2 and x minus 1. We're letting the tangent to be x. So replacing x with tangent, you have tangent of x minus 2 and tangent of x minus 1. If you FOIL it back, you get tangent squared x. You have negative 2 and negative 1. That makes it negative 3 tangent of x. Last term, positive 2. Simplify. We're given 2 minus 2 cosine squared theta on the numerator, so we can factor out the 2, and you're left with 1 minus cosine squared theta, all over 1 plus cosine of theta. 1 could be rewritten as a 1 squared, so squared minus something else squared, so this is another difference of squares. You can factor this what's in the parentheses as a 1 plus cosine of theta and 1 minus cosine of theta. Then you can cancel out the 1 plus cosine squared theta on both top and the bottom. Then you're left with 2 times 1 minus cosine of theta. Next question. We have cosine of theta minus sine of theta all over cosine squared theta minus sine squared theta. 1 in the bottom could be factored out as a cosine theta plus sine of theta, and cosine theta minus sine of theta. So then ones with the minus will cancel out. You're left with 1 over cosine theta plus sine of theta.